morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. I would also like to say a very big thank you to CGID for the amazing work they are doing at disability inclusion and at mainstreaming gender issues in a very peculiar way. Excuse me. So, our work is usually around issues of climate, gender, and disability justices. And we decide to focus on justices because we understand that other than just rights, people have rights, but it is only when they are able to enjoy their rights that is justice. So our focus is on disability justice as it intersects with climate justice and gender justice. Having said so, I would first of all commend the media for the amazing work that it did with supporting for the achievement for the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibitions Act. I think the media played a very integral role towards that. However, I have my own personal reservations as it concerns the media and how they portray persons with disabilities. And I've always said this. I strongly think that some of the stereotypes and myths and misconceptions that have driven violence and all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities is something that the media sort of like propagated. This is evidence in the way that the media tells stories about persons with disabilities. This is evidence in the way that the media oftentimes considers persons with disabilities as afterthoughts. I would give you a very good example. Recently, Adamawa State elected a speaker who happens to be a person with disabilities, Mr. Bathiwa Wesley, and he happens to be a person with disabilities. I have had the irreversible displeasure of reading reportage about how motivational porn. Oh, if a person with disability can do this, why can't you? That's patronizing. That's one. Two, I've also read several reportages about how all kinds of discriminatory terminologies were used against him. And this again reinforces in my mind the fact that persons with disabilities would never be respected until they are seen to be doing something or to have achieved a feat. So we might disagree with this narrative, but then the evidences are there. That's on one regard. I would also talk about the work that we do around humanitarian response and recovery programs, particularly in coastal communities in Nigeria. What we have seen is oftentimes what happens is when journalists go to these communities to interact with these women who are statistically most impacted by fluvial flooding in those communities, they never interact with women with disabilities. They are never asked.
Do you think it's conscious or it's just?
I would say why it's conscious. Again, this might not be perceived across board as generally accepted. But I'm telling you from my own experiences. I think it might not be conscious per se, but then it's just how persons with disabilities are perceived, are often perceived, I should say. It's how they are often considered. So these women will tell us that they are the ones who suffer the most from flooding, but then when journalists come to their communities to ask questions, they are never asked. So
I just want to understand, they are not found or they are not at the space at which the interaction occurs?
Thank you very much for that question. How do you say a population of over 15 million persons are not found? They are not hidden. they are not a hidden population. They are not ants.
No, I'm referring specifically to the communities.
In those communities. Yes. So I'll tell you something. Women with disabilities, persons with disabilities everywhere, and I'm glad I have two of my leaders in the space with me. They are not a hidden population, always. If you want to find them, you would find them. They're organized in groups, in communities, whether they're rural communities, peri-urban communities, whatever kind of communities that they are. What happens is the media has not really considered persons with disabilities as marketable, and that's because most media companies are profit-driven, understandably so. They're profit-driven, so why do I have to portray a person that has no quote-unquote commercial value? That's what we have seen. We have conducted rapid assessment that has shown that this is it. And there's empirical evidence to this. So it's not as though I'm just saying this. So they're organized. If you want to find any group of persons in any communities, you would find them. And this again brings to mind something I must really talk about with how journalists interact with persons with disabilities. There's something very important that's called community entry. So when you are going into a community, it's important that you find gatekeepers of those communities. And when you find them, you go through them, and through them you're able to meet different pressure groups in those communities. If you go through those right community entry techniques, you would always find persons with disabilities. So the point I'm trying to make is, I would like to see a situation where more persons with disabilities are, they're in mainstream media, One last example, please. So again, a few of my mates and I did an informal rapid assessment on representation with Netflix. And we did it vis-a-vis TV shows that focused on persons with disabilities as against TV shows that focused on other marginalized groups. And we found out that the TV shows that focused on persons with disabilities had lower ratings when compared to other communities that are also marginalized. Those ones had higher ratings. Fair enough. But the point, therefore, is it's not marketable. Netflix is a profit-driven entity. They want to make money. So do you think they would go back to do that? So beyond talking about rights, beyond talking about inclusion, we need to start looking at it from a broader perspective. When you understand that this is one last statistics. So
if you can, we'll come back to you again.
No, I really have to make this point. So there's about 30 million persons with disabilities in Nigeria, right? Okay. And more than half of that population are women. Yet you would never find a commercial on TV, and I always say this, where a woman with disability is doing laundry, or giving a child a bath, or using cosmetics, or something like that. Are you therefore saying that women with disabilities don't do those things? Again, that is how the media has always portrayed persons with disabilities.
Right. Thank you for that expose from your experiences. So obviously, the media is being challenged to move away from the tunnel vision approach to dealing with issues of disability and ensure and see them, hear them, and represent them. Jude, you also work with conflict areas. Are the sentiments the same?
Thank you very much. So my name is Jude Ilo. I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Center for Civilians in Conflict. So we've got offices in 10 active conflicts across the world, including Yemen, including Ukraine, and a bit of Iraq, and of course Nigeria. And it's just important to emphasize the power of the media in telling the stories of people who ordinarily will not be heard. I think every one of us can recall the picture that came out of Aleppo in 2016. The little boy that was pulled out of the wreck of a demolished building, due to bombing. And the picture of that boy looking confused with blood and dust and bewilderment in his face. That picture eloquently told the story of Syria without words. People who, for a lot of times, were desensitized about what was going on in Syria, the media brought the story of the little boy to their living room. It brought the story to their computers. It brought the story to their laptops. And somehow, all of us can interact with this little boy. We could see his face. We could see his fear. We could envision being him. We could think of our children being in that kind of situation. And somehow, it changed the narrative. We remember the story also of the washed up little boy who was trying to cross over Europe. And then he died. And he was washed up across the shore. You could look at him, you could see the hope, you could tell his story without knowing his story. And so I think for the area where we work, a lot of people in conflict cannot tell their stories. They don't have the voice. They are busy trying to survive. They are busy trying to live, to bother about sharing to the world what they are going through. It is the power of the media, the power of storytelling, that allows me and you to sit in the comfort of our AC cars and our AC rooms to interact with those realities that otherwise we will never hear, otherwise we may never know. And so it is fundamentally important that the media appreciates its role. The essence of media is not the story of the powerful. The essence of the media is the story of those who ordinarily cannot tell their stories. The platform you are able to give to people who don't have any, and your ability to make an issue of what is important but ordinarily doesn't show in the scale of things. And so in our work, the media is the life wire. The media is the conduit from which we are able to relate to the world the realities of conflict, and somehow able to compel the world to act. In reality, conflicts are often sensationalized. You know, the more you could paint a picture of horror and all of those things, the more clicks you get. But conflicts often talk about the power of resilience, the power of agency of communities who are able in the worst of circumstances to cater for themselves, to protect themselves, to be able to move on. And oftentimes, the resilience, the courage, and the agency of communities in conflict is not the center of reportage, because it's not sexy. It is not sexy to talk about the fact that women could brace the bombs to take their children to school or to make sure their children are learning even when there is war. But of course, if there are scattered bodies on the streets, it gets you the click. So the inability of the media to focus on what is often neglected positives, stories of courage, resilience, and community, and humanity in times of conflict, diminishes the agency of those communities and gives an unbalanced narrative of what conflict is. The other thing I would like to mention is just what happened recently. The story of the 5 billionaires who wanted to go see the Titanic, and the story of hundreds of immigrants whose boats capsized about the same time in the same Western Hemisphere, and the fact that the story of 200 plus humans who were drowning did not receive 5% attention like the ones of the billionaires. The fact that these people were drowning, that we couldn't even find boats to go and rescue them, and the fact that the military and the Air Force and everybody was sending boats to the Atlantic, tells you again that oftentimes, inadvertently, we put different values to life. Yeah. And that's what happens in conflicts.
But is it inadvertent?
Well, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm trying to be nice. But in a lot of situations, and without diminishing the importance of anybody's life, when conflicts happen in the West, it's a different kind of reportage than when it happens in the global South. And it is unfortunate that we live in a world where the value of life is also premised on the color of your skin. And that happens again and again and again. So my point then is, we will not judge journalists or the media. We cannot praise you for what you say about the powerful. We can only praise you for what you say about those who can't say thank you to you, and what you do for those who can't do anything for themselves. And as long as the world continue to diminish the value of the life of the boy in Aleppo, the life of those in Sudan as we speak, the life of those in Ethiopia, the life of our brothers and sisters in Cameroon who have been fighting for years. We don't see that in the news. But if something else happens in the West, it is all over the place. As long as we continue to have this imbalance in the value we put to life and the quality of reportage of conflicts, we are only maintaining that myth that perhaps because of the accident of your birth, you are worth less than the others. And that is not journalism. Thank you.
That is not journalism, says Jude. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us. Also, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Grace Jerry. She's the Executive Director, Inclusive Friends. What do you do, basically, at Inclusive Friends?
All right, thank you very much, and thank you to CGID for this opportunity. Inclusive Friends is an organization where we rely heavily on data and research to promote disability inclusion in the area of democracy and governance, promoting humanitarian peace and conflict action, also promoting gender participation. And of course, we look at the areas of inclusive education and economic empowerment for women and girls with disabilities, working across all the states.
And what do you find are the key critical issues of representation and inclusion with members of your community?
All right, I would begin by saying that one of the things that the community of persons with disabilities look forward to the most is how accurately our issues are depicted, how accurately our issues are captured, how accurately our issues are reported. If you listen to the conversation of my colleagues here, you would know that the community of persons with disabilities that I represent is, here in Nigeria alone, is about close to 35 million people. That is almost the population of a country. And if a person with disabilities in Nigeria alone would say we would separate ourselves from every other person, we are enough to set up and run and govern a country. So that is a population that should not be ignored, that in whatever intervention, in whatever programs, their interest needs to be carried along, their interest needs to be considered. I'm saying this to say that when we look at how issues of disabilities are being reported, you would know that there's still a lot of gaps in terms of knowledge and capacity within the media space, because issues of disabilities are still projected from the angle of charity and not human rights. And we have long since moved from that point of charity to human rights. First, as a human being with inherent rights, born as a human. As such, I have every right, equal right as another citizen of my dear country. If the media would view me first from that angle of first being a human with an inherent right, then you would want to report my issues from the point of projecting me as that human with right. So it is important that first and foremost, you fashion yourself with the knowledge. Recently, we got a contract, I would say, to review a research that an organization did. And it gladdened my heart because they did a research on the community of persons with disabilities, but they say before we publish this research to the space, we need the lens of persons with disabilities to review in terms of language, in terms of how the issues are depicted, in terms of how they capture issues of disability. And it was, it gladdened our hearts so much because we sat over this research and we did a lot of terminology changes. We did a lot of, a couple of even citing some policies, some laws, some articles that speak specifically to those issues. And now I would say to you that as soon as that report is released, you would know that it captures issues of disability as it should. And this I'm going to make as a recommendation to the media people sitting in this room. Yes, we understand that there is capacity gap, and that is why we are here to work very, very closely with you. At the Inclusive Friends, one of the things that we have done is to provide training training for media, both nationally and even outside the country, and even state-wise. We have provided trainings over time. We would be glad to provide you with these trainings. We will be glad to sit with you. We'll be glad to read your articles. Just read them and provide the right language and right terminologies. Because it's important that what you put out in the space, first and foremost, is universally agreed, is universally accepted with the language of the UNCRPD. Every one of you seated in this room, either you come from a country that has ratified the UNCRPD, and because you have ratified or you are a signatory to it, it means you are bound by the right language and the right way to promote disability issues. So you don't do otherwise. Don't do otherwise. I'm about to speak a PJ language, but I won't do that. Don't do otherwise. And that is why we're here to work very closely.
Can you give us examples of languages that some of these languages, because even there are terminologies that have changed to terminologies that are more empowering, that are more representative, that speak. So give us some examples of new terminologies that are correct, politically correct.
Exactly. All right, I think one of the most popularly used, I would say, is the community of the special need. The special need community. Okay, let me not say what I'm about to say again. But
it's a safe space, not so.
All right. How many of you here, one way or the other, you're having one form of financial challenge or the other? Financial challenge. You don't have enough fuel in your car. Are you a special needs person? You're a special needs person, I would say, because you need money to buy fuel. And that need for me is special. That need for you is special, isn't it? So you don't use that language to classify the community of people with disabilities. It's as simple as persons with disabilities or people with disabilities and not people living with disability. I can live with my cat. I can live with my dear sister, but I'm not living with a disability, all right? So these are people with disabilities and not special needs. And they would go as far as challenging you. No, we don't believe in disability. We don't believe in disabled. You people are special. That is ableism. We don't promote that. You are trying to patronize us and make us feel like we're special. No, we don't need that. All we need you to do is to look at us from that point of first the human, first a person with an impairment, first a person with a disability. So you report from that angle, a person with disability, not a person with special need. Thank you.
Wow. Disability reporting 101. Thank you, Grace. Beautifully done. So we're going to quickly do this next round, and then I'll open the floor for contribution and maybe some responses from the media representatives who are listening to us. So I'm going to start with you. Back now, we want solutions, okay? So back home in Ghana, my organization, Alliance for Women in Media, we conducted a baseline survey on the status of women in Ghanaian media. And one of the findings across the country, it was a national survey. Professor Odigajepo led that research for us. Only 1% of females in media were in any top management positions. And this is within the media industry itself. So whilst you're crying that we're not representing your communities enough, I'll tell you that within the media space itself, these issues of representation and inclusion and diversity are issues we are dealing with. So in terms of solutions, how do we bridge this gap, really? Let's focus on solutions. And if you can speak from the standpoint of your primary community that you work for and with.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you have data. Yeah. I think one of the first steps will be collecting the data. I think that's really critical so that we know the reality. But in case I don't have an opportunity to talk about this again, I listened to the keynote yesterday, even though I wasn't here, and Richard mentioned something about we need new voices and we need new players. Now, beyond the source of your news as the media, I think one of the things that we need to talk about, and I think continues to be the elephant in the room, is ownership of media, right? Because when I listen to everything that we have said around representation, if the people who own the media are a handful of old men, with all due respect, then there is not much that's going to change in a very long time. And I think we should confront that, right? So ownership is a big piece. The more we have women as owners of these media houses, the more likely you would have women in leadership of these media houses. And this is just evidence-based, right? Because we will represent our kind. It is easier to represent our kind. Then we talk about distribution as well, right? So we leave ownership, we go to distribution of media. It's the same thing, right? We will distribute to our peeps. It's just the way this thing works, right? And so I'm talking that beyond whose voice you're giving access to and you're portraying in the media, I think one of the things that can really start to solve it is ownership. And then how do we solve ownership? I think this is where financing comes in. And this is a conversation that we do not have. But women would need access to finance. There is a reason why Mo Abudu is a shining light. And there's the one, right? She shouldn't be the only one. So we need access to finance and access to capital for women to be able to own media. And I think that that's a big conversation. If we can do that, we can start to crack it. And then I think the other thing is, I really loved what Grace said about representation. Look, this thing has to be intentional. That's one of the things we've learned. If we're not intentional about it, it will not happen. So that intentionality about looking around and saying who's at the table and who's not at the table. So I think if we can just talk about ownership and then look at the value chain of the media and see how we can be more representative. And then I think the second thing is being intentional, whether it's at the organizational level, the institutional level. And I mean, a few years ago, BBC did 50-50. I don't know if we know about that campaign, but the intentionality about we need women's voices, we need women to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, directing, producing. It was intentional. And to you, I'm not sure who mentioned it, but oh yeah, it was Noel. Nigeria has 50% women. That's why I was snapping at that point. So when people say we cannot find women, it's a little ridiculous, right? Because we are half of the population. So that's one. The second thing I will say is we have to go beyond being gender responsive within our organizations, especially with the media, to being gender transformative. And I'll tell you what that looks like. We know that going to the field as a journalist can be dangerous, right? What are the intentional steps for a woman versus a man to go to the field? Instead of saying, no, this place is too dangerous to send a woman, what about putting in place the right sets of policies, insurance, whatever it is that is needed for a woman to be able to function in that role? What are the support systems? I mean, Busana and I had an exchange this morning because I was supposed to come yesterday, but I couldn't because my nanny went away. And so my 3 kids, I can't leave them at home and fly here. These are real issues. And I know that you might not be able to relate to it, but we have to be intentional about creating support systems for the media as a whole to become inclusive.
It's brilliant what you've just said. I mean, yesterday we were reminded about the power of the mindset and attitude and the way we view problems. When COVID came in Ghana, we also had this canker of most expert voices and images being men, okay? So COVID came and all of a sudden it was possible to interview people from the comfort of their homes via Zoom. And it was one of the reasons because the time, morning show, evening show, women are doing school runs, so they can't make it for a 20, 30-minute program at 6 a.m. for a TV or a radio program. But yet, we were not yet open to the opportunity of speaking to women at the comfort of where they are at any point in time. COVID came, and all of a sudden, everybody was doing Zoom from their homes. And we saw a spike in women voices because it was more convenient for them to engage that way. So thank you for that. So we really need to be more intentional about it. Mr. Jake. also on solutions, basically. And as we agree that the media itself needs representation in diversity, I always ask my colleagues, so how many media houses can say, okay, we have persons, what was the word again? Persons with disability on our staff list. And we know that diversity is very good for business. Even with something as simple as pronunciation of names, if you had ethnic diversity in your media organizations, you won't come on air and mispronounce names of people in the country that you work with. So there is value to that. So will your advocacy also include asking media people to do staff audits to see how diverse their organizations are? Because we hope that if you're diverse, then we'll represent the diversity that our communities are made up of. Mr. Jake.
All right, thank you. Oftentimes when I have opportunities like this, I'm carried away by my passion to get the job done, and I talk less about what we do. But if you are looking to hear about what we do, by the way, my organization had a name change from the Albino Foundation to TAF Africa. TAF actually now represents the All Right Foundation, because we sort of scaled up the work we do. We started as an albinism focus group, and well, from the feedback, we did reasonably well. Sometimes it's good to blow your trumpet, you know. And, you know, certain and a number of organizations put a demand on us to expand our services and serve the wider community of persons with disability. I think one of the success of what we have done has centered on disability inclusion and not necessarily an exclusive list of maybe intervening in governance. So we're in health sector, in education, in human rights, and issues around women. I'm very passionate about women. I'm very, very passionate about women. And I believe that you are the best managers of resources. And when you give a woman a chance to do anything, oftentimes she does it better. And I have lived by example. My management is made up of 7 women and 6 men. And my board is diverse. We're made up of 4 women, 4 very skillful women, and 5 men. So diversity is important to me. Having said that, let me take a detour. Let me flip the conversation. I know that, yes, the media is not doing well for us. I want to also zero in, as I conclude, on what our community can do to get media attention, you know. And so I told you my background, coming from a very poor home, no name, nothing to write home about. And to me, that was an advantage. And so I needed to create what will attract the media in the most honest way. The media are scouting for news. And so if you create a story that is newsworthy and credible, they will come to you, you know. So we need to create our own story, verifiable story, credible story, okay? Secondly, we need to mainstream these stories into the media, okay? Take, for instance, we're dealing with the issue of fuel subsidies and all that. And I told my colleagues in the office, listen, I need you guys to put out a simple question out there. Who are the Nigerians that are suffering? What are they feeling? What can we do to make their life better? And just launching that research, and I'm going to name names. Channel has called us, they're interested in that story. Arise has called us, they're interested in that outcome. TVC has called us, you know. And so we need to, as persons with disability, and some of them are stars in their right, we need to be able to create an honest story, and by way of relationship, because you see, listen to this, relationship determines allocation of resources. So by way of relationship, you know, you can actually mainstream your story. So if I want to talk to Arise, I talk to Nduka, one phone call away, put Jack on, and that's it. I want to talk to Channel, I talk to John. You see, I'm a Christian. When God wanted to deliver Egypt, he didn't ask Moses to go to Deputy Pharaoh. Right. He told Moses to go to Pharaoh.
Right.
So in the act of negotiation, you speak to the person in authority and get a yes or no. So we need to learn to mainstream our story in the mainstream media. We've created a strategy that would regularly keep us on the tube.
Right.
Every week. For the next 6 months. I can tell you, yesterday I was on 2 major networks. Today I have another interview. So we need to learn to tell our story in the most honorable way. And finally, we need to create a strategy that sustains that story. So you say, okay, we've talked everything about albinism. Oh, wait a minute. Have you talked about a mother of a person with albinism? What about a friend of persons with albinism? I remember, and I end with this. I remember growing up, and I wanted to go out with my cousins, you know, and they said to me they don't want to go out. So I assumed that they didn't want to go out. These are my cousins.
Right.
So I decided to go out on my own. And as I was going, and I turned my back, and I saw them coming. So I went back to them and said, but you told me, it's I beg, we don't want to go out with you. Now,
why?
Ladies and gentlemen, this story happened 55 years ago. I'm 62. I still remember it.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so very much for sharing some success story and new strategies, charging marginalized and underrepresented communities to be more also proactive in their media strategy, so that the media cannot, you know, avoid you. They can't avoid you at all. So I'm going to take just about 3 questions from the 3 columns in the room. 1, 1, 1, and then we'll come back. Jake and Noel, you wrap up, and Grace with us. So yes, 1 gentleman here, so 1 lady here, and then 1 gentleman there. Yes? Yes. You with the earpod. Yes. Your name and straight to the point, okay? Speed it up.
My name is Lasisi Godwin. I'm a public health researcher and an academic writer. Now, I'm giving this introduction based on the question I'm about to ask. My dear mommy on the right-hand side.
Grace.
Yes, okay. Mommy Grace, yes. She spoke about the contextual definition of classifying people with disabilities. Now, in 400 level, I conducted a research in University of Ilorin on people with disabilities. And now in research projects, there's something we call operational definition of terms. We define words based on the context of the research we're carrying out. Now, from my own understanding, when we say special needs, I do not see the special needs as the person. I see it in the form of the needs that they require, or the needs that they actually need. Now, for example, now when we're conducting the research, we're giving out questionnaires to people with disabilities. Now, for the blind, we use Braille. For those with auditory impairments, we use different measures to get their opinions on the research we're carrying out. Now, what I want to understand is this. If we are talking about classification of people with special needs, and according to what you said people with disabilities should not be referred to those as should not be referred to people that need special needs. Now, I want to ask, what do we now refer to as what they actually need? For example, now someone with auditory impairments, to enhance inclusive education in a class, he will definitely need hearing and auditory aid to help him hear. For those with partial blindness, they might need to sit in the front, or need ocular glasses.
I think she gets the question.
Yes, so it can be to anyone, because I want to understand what context do we use to define people with disabilities?
It's a brilliant question. We'll come to that. So if there's a female here, I'll take a female. Sorry. I just want to try and do it as scientifically as possible. Yes, please. Oh, no, let me take the one at the back, because they're all in green. Quickly, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Oluwalayomi, and my question is this. How are we trying to make the masses, the people, receptive of information when they come from...
are you a journalist?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right, so this is my question. We've established that there's need for inclusiveness and representation, but then there are still there are still people with very crude mindsets that it's so bad that if they see a news or a TV show and it's anchored by women, they're quick to change the channel and not regard what they're saying. Like, why should I listen to women talking? More than when it's men actually talking. So my question is, how are we educating the masses to be receptive of information after the media has included?
How do you suggest we do that as a media person?
I'm asking.
Yeah, I know, but I also want you to share your thoughts from your experience.
All right, so I feel like there's a need for a very serious reorientation, especially in West Africa generally, because several cultures still undermine women. Several cultures still feel like, oh, children, girl child shouldn't go to school and all. So we need to go to the grassroots to educate people and say, okay, you know what, this is a lady, she went to school, she came out this way, and she has something important to say, and what she's saying is equally as valuable as what this man is saying. You need to listen.
And the media, so in your media house, for example, if you go back to your media house, what might you do differently to increase this public awareness?
Maybe organize campaigns, draw out strategies to actually go. Well, you're making me answer all my questions.
Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. Yes. Okay, there's a mic. He's already taken the mic.
Good morning. My name is Tahir. I'm a local journalist from Jigawa State. Mine it is a little inspiration story concerning the gender equality. There are one thief in my area. He's quite brilliant, and he pursued his first degree. So we made a little interview with him. It is a written form. We made an interview. So he said he went in my intervention to have a scholarship for MSc. He's the first person that right now pursue MSc in Jigawa State, all the Jigawa State deaf right now. After the publication of the story, currently now he received sum of 500,000 from Professor Angai scholarship, 2.5 million from Tony Emeleme Foundation, and right now he's one of the fellow of Mandela. Right now he's in United States. So that's a little inspiration story of those people with disability. We have to inspire them, making some interview with them, and help them to make their dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay, one bonus to the lady. So we have two.
Thank you very much. My name is Osawana May Bizugbe. I am a journalist and I work with the CGID. So my question, thank you to the panelists for dissecting this very important topic. We've already identified the issues, we've identified the gaps, and it seems like we all know the gaps, we all know the issues. But the question is, it seems we come here year in, year out, we hold all of these conferences, these gatherings, and we have these conversations, we talk about the same issues here and there. And then at the end of the day, it seems like we're not saying tangible solutions. How do we rally stakeholders' advocacy and policy making to ensure that the media's the media deploy best practices to ensure democratic accountability in terms of the issues of inclusion and representation? How do we ensure that we put strategies in place that would begin to yield tangible results? Because it seems like
who are the change agents?
The media, we are part of the change.
So how do you do that?
And I agree personally as a journalist that just as Noel identified, that we consciously and unconsciously portray persons with disabilities in a manner that changes or that influences the public perception. I think we can begin to, like I said, collaboration is one strategy I feel we can deploy to ensure that we do this. And I feel organizations such as IFA should be open to media collaborations to ensure that we begin to see tangible solutions.
Collaboration. So I'm going to come to you. I mean, one of the major issues we deal with in Ghana is that when we do capacity building program, editors, beyond media owners who are hardly in the newsrooms, we're talking the media managers who are the everyday managers of newsrooms and editors, they hardly come for these capacity building programs. They would not come. So they will send the journalist to come, and that person is not in, what do you call it, a decision-making role. And we need a certain mindset re-engineering to appreciate these things. So we cannot build so maybe we might take the capacity to them if they won't come for the capacity building, right? Shola, you want to say, Busola? Okay, Busola from CJID wants to add.
So I just wanted to take the moment to say that at the CJID for about 2 years now, we created the Media and Gender Project to address this challenge of inclusion in the media. And one of the strategies that we have adopted is to partner with organizations like Inclusive Friends Association, the Albino Foundation, to do continue, TAF. Forgive me, Mr.
Names matter now.
Yes. You know, to do continuous training for journalists around the issues of language, framing, and all of that. I think where we need to do more is newsroom engagement. To be honest, editors are, busy is the word, because, you know, that's what they do. Whether they are sleeping, their heads is working. So if we cannot get them into rooms where these conversations are happening, we had better take the message, you know, to them. So this is an area that I would like us to, you know, begin to, whether on women issues. So now we deliberately do editorial engagement, you know, for editors and for journalists around gender inclusion, around gender mainstreaming, around gender transformative storytelling. So it's time we ramp up that kind of engagement, even for legislators. If we're not able to bring them to where we are, then we had better find a way to go to where they are.
Exactly. Grace, so the story about, you know, the confusion,
Yes.
Clarity, how do we categorize needs and still represent your issues?
All right, thank you. And I'm going to start from here, and just go around. Recently, we had a training for even legislators. And it will amaze you that when you hold these meetings with them, you will just see that what they actually needed was that training. Yeah. Because they do not know. And that is why we are not quick to want to blame them, to begin to be angry, you know, throw the sticks at them. It's because they do not know. And that is why for Inclusive Friends, we are more than ready, we are more than open. We can read your research, we can read your articles, we can provide training. Thank you even for this partnership that we have started with you over time. We are more than ready to do that. And in terms of using the right language, there is nothing wrong with you outlining what those needs are. But don't address that individual as that individual with that special need. I am a person with a disability, and I'm comfortable. There's dignity when you address me as a person with a disability. But when you address me as a person with a special need, there's this negativity that is surrounding it. Normally, when you meet someone who approaches you with a need, or you find people who are needy in the society, the approach towards them is from that point of handouts, small handouts. Let's reach out to them. Give them one small pack of Indomie, or, you know, it's very little when you think about someone from that point of need. So when you look at a Grace Jerry now, you will know that beyond being a person, quote and unquote, a special need, you know that she has a capacity to deliver. She has a capacity to add knowledge. She has a capacity to build, her society. So you don't look at me from that negative angle of a person who is needing maybe food, someone who is needing, I don't even know how to put it, but needing the very little things of life. What I need is for a Nigeria that is more inclusive. What I need is to see employment opportunities for my community. What I need to see is access to inclusive education. What I need is to see persons with disabilities run for political offices and being elected into political offices. I mean, for me, that is what I need. So it's okay for you to talk about us as a person, a deaf person, or a person who is deaf, or a blind person who is needing a hearing aid, who is needing the Braille ballot guide, a Braille machine, someone who is needing this, and that, and it's fine. List it, because it will amaze you that people don't even know what those needs are. Yeah. So it will go a long way for our community to see someone like you mention what those needs are. And I can tell you that we have an extensive report that captures all of those needs, and we're ready to share with you to help you broaden the work that you do. And one more thing that someone mentioned here regarding the training, it's also important that you also bring these editors. Persons with disabilities are editors. So in case you don't know, there are editors, there are people who cast news, there are people who write scripts within this same disability community. I seated here, I can act, I'm an actor. I don't mind, I can't wait to see myself act a movie. But it's when you don't interact with our community, you would think that these people are not within the community. But within this same community of over 33 million or 35 million Nigerians with disabilities, you will find these same people who can sit in front of your cameras and still cast news. Come to me, I will give you those.
Very well.
We've
run out of time, so I'm just going to give Joel and Jude the last words on this panel. So, Joel, we're talking solutions. What's your call to action now in terms of, strengthening the relationship between the media and the communities that you represent?
It's Noel. Okay, so I would like to see a situation where, let me put this in perspective. And understand there are people from other West African countries here, right? Yeah. So out of 13 ECOWAS countries, only 3 countries have ratified the protocol for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights relating to persons with disabilities. Now that's something that journalists can, amplify. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Talking about solutions, I think these are the kind of things that we can begin to hold our governments to account. How is it that you are a West African country, 15, and just 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and I think Togo. So even Nigeria has not ratified it. We have, no, not the UNCRPD. Not the UNCRPD, we did that a long time ago. This is a more recent thing, yeah. Yes, the African Charter. And it's really, really important because areas that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities did not capture, this charter did an amazing job in capturing it. We must always try to approach our advocacy from a policy level. That's the one point I want to make. The second point is I want to see the media do a lot more developmental reportage. What that means essentially is that all of the articles that you're putting out are issue-based and evidence-based. And it's totally wrong of me to be here and not touch on climate justice as well, and how it's impacting on women and girls with disabilities in coastal communities across Nigeria. For example, when you think about it, the biggest contributors to climate change are oil companies. It's a patriarchal system. The biggest contributors to climate change are oil companies, miners, the fishing industry, but they are the least sufferers of climate change. The biggest sufferers are the least contributors, women. And amongst those women, when you disaggregate that data, you'll find out that it's women and girls with disabilities. And I heard again, displeasure of reading this report by some amazing journalists who was saying the government, as an attempt to contain climate change, should cut down or control the number of cattle that women rear, the livestock that they rear, because cattle dung goes into the atmosphere. Really? While that is scientifically accurate, their dung does not cause enough damage, as much damage as automobiles and other things do. Right. So I want to see developmental reportage that are issue-based, that are rights-based as well. Right. And this comes to persons with disabilities. And I also want to see how we are carrying out strategic advocacy that's measurable. We have a timeline for it. I think if we took all of this into cognizance, we'll do greatly.
We'll build a fairer society. Yes, Jay. Jude, actually. Our time is up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a couple of points. One is, I think we need to also acknowledge that there's been some progress. It is really, really important to understand, if we had this gathering 10 years ago, it would be a different coloration, it would be a different agenda. You probably will not have the access for people to come up the stage, in wheelchair and all of that. So we need to acknowledge some progress has been made, and is also very fundamental to learn from those efforts that had worked in the past, and how can we build on them. I always take strong exceptions in gatherings like this when I hear things like, oh, we gather every time to talk and nothing changes. That is unfair to those who are making effort, regardless and in spite of the very difficult situation within which journalists are working in West Africa. There's been some remarkable progress, and we need to acknowledge that. The second point I want to make is that perhaps it is time for media groups to think about specialization on issues. Inclusion is a very broad topic. There are too many things we need to put on the table. It could be disability rights, it could be women's rights, it could be children's rights. Perhaps colleagues should start thinking about having media organizations that specialize in a particular area and put energy and expertise into it. One example I like to mention in conversations like this is the human angle. And they are focused on the Northeast and the Sahel on conflict, and reporting on that, building skills on that, and making sure that they have the right kind of tool and the right kind of spread to do the job effectively. We need more of those across all these issues. And then the final point I want to make is about intentionality, which has been mentioned here. It is easy, really, to talk about these things and say, oh, media should do this, media should do that. But in the real world, where you need to maintain your business, it is really, really difficult to do all of these things with the resources you have, with the advertising you're chasing. And so the intentionality I'm talking about here is that those who invest in media, those who give grants, funders, and all of that, should also be part of this messaging about inclusion and building the needed resources and flexibility in the support we give to media houses for them to be able to do this kind of work. For media houses also, is also about being intentional about what you do, especially for conflict areas. How many locals are you using in your reportage? When you say, oh, people can't get in here, it is too dangerous. How are you building up skill sets within those communities to fill the gap that would ordinarily necessitate you to go in there and for which you don't have the resources? Because when we're able to do this and be creative in the way we approach inclusion, we are better able to carry more people along. And the final point is simple. This inclusion conversation is not really just about the best interest of the excluded. For a media organization to actually be professional, to have the right kind of news, to be step ahead the others, inclusion works in your best interest. It's a good business model. So we're not asking you to do something that is going to cost you money or do something that is extra. We're asking you to make money. And by including people, you will make more money. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. A round of applause. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And that's how we conclude this first panel for the second day WAGIC conference on media and democracy. Indeed, diversity improves our content, it improves our fairness, and it improves our balance. And just as we have heard, let us represent the various voices, the images, the stories of the various communities we intersect with, even as a media industry itself, to ensure that we reflect the diversity that our societies are made up of. Please, let's give my panel members another round of applause. Even as they take their seats, Jake Epelle, CEO, the Albino Foundation, Noel Balogun, Inclusion and Gender Expert, co-founder, Great Initiative, Abosede George-Ogan, founder, Women in Leadership Advancement Network, Jude Ilo, acting executive director, Center for Civilians in Conflict, and Grace Jerry, executive director, Inclusive Friends. A huge round of applause. We'll take a group photo, please.